Well guys, it's finally time. Now to be clear, I'm not going to be spraying the whole car yet, but I bought one can of the base coat and one can of the clear so I can test them on a couple small panels first before I do the whole car. Just seems like it'd be a good idea to see how it comes out before I dump a few hundred into paint that may not look good. And again, I'm using this cheap Duplicolor paint that I got from O'Reilly. It's lacquer based, so it's more old-fashioned and not as durable as more modern stuff, but it is much cheaper and easier to use, so for my first paint job, it's probably a good idea, especially because someday I'll probably get a professional paint job anyways. I just need something to last a few years. So I got the car rolled out of the way, I swept up the whole garage, and I'm gonna do just these little side skirt pieces and see how it goes. I also got the side mirrors hung up, so I may get these too if the paint looks good enough. So yeah, here we go. I'm gonna cut the filming because I don't really know what to expect overspray wise with my camera. Alright, I got the pieces sprayed and honestly, the red looks pretty good. It's super vibrant and bold. I think personally, I would prefer something a bit softer and more pink, but as a non-custom paint color, this is definitely good and I like it. The only issue though is you can see there's some absolutely insane orange peel on it. Like, it's so bumpy, I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if it's just the gun settings or what, but this is ridiculous. Alright, I was happy with the color, so I ended up just spraying a few other small pieces while I was at it. As you can see, there's still quite a bit of orange peel on them though, but I figure I can just sand them smooth before I do the clear coat. It'll obviously be more work, but whatever. I also did the mirrors too, but on one of them I accidentally bumped it with my back, so I have to sand this smooth and probably respray this small little part. Okay, so I did some research. It turns out you can't actually sand the base coat because then you'll see sanding strokes in the final paint job. So what this means is I gotta sand the orange peel smooth, then spray a new top coat to hide it. I kinda wish I knew that before I sprayed all these pieces, but oh well, now I just gotta figure out why I'm getting so much orange peel and give an extra coat to these. Alright, it's the next day. I ordered some more base coat, but it won't be ready for pickup for another day, so I'm kind of just hanging out till then. Now, there is quite a bit of prep to do before I can spray anything, so hopefully I can get it all done in one go. I don't know why I didn't just do this earlier, but I finally figured out how to remove these window trim pieces. I honestly just thought they were going to be too difficult to do, but this one just has 2 screws and pops off. This back one is a bit trickier, but you basically have to just push up on it until the plastic clips pop out. Again, very sketchy to do without snapping something though. But yeah, I want to respray these black because they are pretty worn out. I also want to do the other window trim because they're all pretty worn and scraped up. Got the trim all sprayed up. I gave them a light sanding to clean them up, and then I used a can of just black spray paint I had laying around. I figured it'll probably be fine, and it says it sticks to both metal and rubber, which is needed for this because some of the trim is actually rubber. But yeah, it looks way nicer now. Small little detail, but super easy to do. We also had spare windshield wipers, so I sanded those down, and I'm gonna respray them as well. Today is the day. Not the final day of work, to be clear, but finally we are spraying the base coat. So assuming nothing goes horribly wrong, which, let's be real, something is probably gonna go horribly wrong, but if everything goes well, then the whole car should be red by the end of the day. So now I gotta mask off and prep the whole car and all the extra pieces, which is probably gonna take a few hours in itself. Alright, got all the masking done. Again, took forever, but it's done. Now, another thing is, I swept the garage a while ago, but I hear it's a good idea to wet the floor a bit to prevent any extra dust from being kicked up. Now, the very last thing to do is wipe everything with degreaser one last time to make sure it's all clean and ready for paint, and then you're going to do the same thing with a tack cloth, which should remove all the little extra dust. Finally, it is time. Another landmark moment here. The base coat is going on. I gotta say, though it is a ton of work spraying the entire car and extra panels off the car, it is so satisfying to see this happen. Like, this is it. Obviously, I still need clear coat, but this is the color of the car. Now, it is recommended to do 3 to 4 coats, so I am keeping tally of how many I've done so far. Honestly, we'll see how much paint I have left over, but I may do an extra coat or two because I really have no idea how my technique is at covering everything evenly. Speaking of technique, I did some research and I did find out why I was getting so much orange peel before. It turns out I was measuring the air pressure PSI incorrectly this entire time, like geez. Thankfully I only messed up on the primer really, since that had to be sanded anyways. But essentially each type of paint has a different PSI it's meant to be sprayed at, but I was measuring it wrong. The air compressor has a pressure gauge and a knob you can adjust. The thing is, you're supposed to check it as you pull the spray gun trigger. I was measuring it at rest, which is completely different because when you pull the trigger, the pressure drops as the air flows. So essentially I had the air pressure set too low, which meant the paint wasn't getting vaporized enough. Instead it was just spraying out all splattery and clumping up, thus creating the orange peel. By properly setting the PSI, I have noticed a much more even and smooth coat of paint, which is a relief. It took a couple hours of spraying, but I got everything done. Feels good. As you can see, I have quite a few pieces not on the car that had to be sprayed, so there definitely was a lot of shuffling parts around as I moved things from the painting area to the drying racks, but thankfully nothing fell though. Now, I gotta say, there are quite a few imperfections, but nothing too major. First off, there's definitely some bits of dust here and there, which is just reality of working in a garage and not a paint booth. Not a huge deal, honestly. The bigger thing is I got a couple runs and sags at points. See, the issue is in order to get that paint smooth, you gotta do a thick coat, but going too thick means you get runs. Oppositely, if you spray too thin with the paint, then it can come out a bit rough and you have orange peel. So it's very hard to find a balance, especially because every panel is a different size, shape, and angle. So I did end up spraying a bit on the thin side, but I don't think it came out too rough. Anyways, with the couple runs I got, what I'm gonna do is sand them down, then use a bit of my leftover paint to respray another top coat on everything before I do the clear coat. I just would rather spend the extra time getting these taken care of than live with runs forever. I'm also gonna try to sand out a bit of the dust, and the new top coat will hopefully have less dust in it. Also, what's annoying is at one point, I accidentally knocked the spray gun stand over. I gotta set the spray gun down on this every now and then to refill the paint cup, but man, did that create a mess in the middle of painting. Thankfully, it was pretty empty when it happened though. Okay, I don't really know how it didn't cross my mind to film any of it, but pretty much I just had to wait 3 days for the base coat to dry, then I sanded down the runs nice and smooth, and now I sprayed a new coat of red base coat, which looks a lot better, but I did go a bit on the rough side in order to avoid more runs, but I think it'll be good enough. So now it's finally time to spray the clear coat. I hope I have enough. I bought 6 quarts, which was enough for the base coat. Now, as I spray it, I can already tell this clear coat is very different than the base coat. It seems a lot thinner and more watery, so I hope it comes out alright, but my practice technique from the base coat is definitely already being thrown for a loop. After a few hours, I got the clear coat on, but there are a few notes I have. One, because the clear coat sprays so thin, I got about 3 coats on the body and about half of the other pieces, but I am out of paint, so I didn't finish. Plus, though 3 coats is fine, I do think I want an extra couple just for extra protection and to get a better shine. The other issue is I got a few runs in the paint. Again, the problem is in order to have a nice smooth surface, you have to spray it thick, but it's hard to spray thick and not get runs. So I ended up spraying thinner coats for most of the car, which did result in some rough orange peel, but it's better than having drips and sags in the paint everywhere. Admittedly, it is still pretty bad with how much orange peel there is, but I have a possible solution for that later. Honestly, it's hard to say exactly how to get the perfect smooth spray job, but this is my first time doing it, so I'm sure it comes down to my own technique, and I probably don't have the exact right settings on the spray gun either. Plus, on top of that, it's worth noting I am using a cheap Harbor Freight spray gun, which probably doesn't help. I just used the one my dad had, so I really didn't do any research into it to tell if it's actually good or not. Specifically, the panels that are off the car seem to have come out the best, while the ones on the body are rougher. I'd imagine this is because I just have more space to work with and get better angles while spraying, plus they're smaller so it's easier to stay focused and do an even spray. The last annoyance is the tape that was holding up one of the mirrors came loose and it fell, so now I gotta start this thing over from scratch, which is a huge pain in the butt. Alright, it's been a couple days, the clear coat has had plenty of time to dry, so now I'm gonna quickly sand the runs down, then later tonight I'm gonna just power through and spray the extra coats. I bought 6 more quarts of clear coat, which is quite a bit and pretty expensive, but again, I want to have plenty of extra coats to be safe, and also the MR2 just has a lot of extra pieces like the spoiler, side skirts and stuff that take up extra paint versus like a normal car. Also, yesterday I rattle can spray painted the little headlight surrounds, just another little touch to make the car a bit sharper. I also, of course, have the side mirror, which I had to sand down and respray with primer, so before I do any clear coat, I'm going to spray the base back on it. Words cannot describe how mad I am about this. Pretty much what happened was I sprayed the mirror red again, but then I wanted to air the garage out because of the paint fumes, so I opened the garage door, and of course, I had this thing hanging on the garage door, so it got knocked off and fell again. At this point, it's not worth doing again, so I'm just gonna save it and spray it when I paint the lip, because if you haven't noticed, I haven't started that yet because it needs a test fitting before painting, so I'm just gonna forget about this for now and move on. I only have a couple runs and sanding them is pretty easy. You just gotta use some 1500 grit sandpaper. You wanna use this really fine grit because you don't wanna cut through the clear coat. If you accidentally sand too far and hit the base coat, then you pretty much just gotta start all over because otherwise you'll see the sanding marks in the base coat. So because it's such a high grit sandpaper, it does take forever to make any progress, but it's worth the patience. But now I'm just going to put the camera away and spray the rest of the clear coat real fast. Just want to get the last big paint session done with. And yeah, that's about it. The car is all clear coated. I mean, except the lip and single mirror, but other than that, it's sprayed, and man, does it feel good. Again, obviously, there's still a couple dust spots and a ton of orange peel. The dust I don't care as much about, but the orange peel is pretty bad. I do have a plan to sand and buff it, which I'll do next, but we'll see how well that works with how rough it is. It's been a couple days yet again, and the paint is dry, so now I'm going to reassemble part of the car, mainly just get these front fenders back on so they're out of the way. I had to spray them separate because I couldn't get the bumper off due to rusted bolts. And I gotta say, getting this thing on is a lot harder when you have fresh paint because, geez, it's pretty much impossible not to scratch anything. I got it on, but you can see I did leave a little scratch on the door. That may buff out though, but we'll see. I got the other side on as well, but this time I used some masking tape to protect the door edge from scratching. Now I also am going to install my new lip. I got this as part of a deal from Woodsport. I'm actually going to release a sponsored full install tutorial separate from this video, so I'm just going to kind of skim over the process here since that will have the full details. Pretty much though, it just needs to be test fitted and then holes need to be drilled. Then after that I can sand it down and prime it. While I wait for that to dry, I'm going to turn my attention to the battery. I actually finally found one of these battery brackets so I can securely mount my battery for once. It's so stupid this was missing. Like, how does this even get lost? My only guess is at one point the car sat unused for a while and the owner removed the battery for one reason or another. Then through that period of time, the bracket just got lost. I also decided to give a quick sand and reprime for the little front valences that go above the lip. I literally just painted them with the rest of the car, but fitting the lip kind of scraped them up a bit, so I was like, whatever, they're so small, I might as well spend the extra couple minutes and repaint them with the lip, and also the one mirror. With the primer dry, it's now time to bust the paint gun out for one last time. I hope. I just gotta spray the lip and other little pieces and let them sit for a couple days before I install them. Now I'm going to hopefully save my paint job and remove as much orange peel as possible. I've made what should be the last big investment in the paint job, and I bought an $80 dual action buffing wheel from Harbor Freight, some pads, compound, and polish. Now, I had to do some research on this because I swear every step of bodywork and paint is just its own little completely separate skill set, but I think I have a basic understanding of this down. The main things with this gear is it's a dual action polisher, or DA, which is different than a rotary one. A rotary one just spins in a circle, which is actually stronger and better, but you risk cutting through the clear coat easier and also causing deeper scratches. A DA polisher spins and moves, I guess, so it's less harsh, and it's just safer to work with. Then the compound I chose is Meguiars 105, and the polish is Meguiars 205. I hope I bought enough, because I really didn't want to spend the extra and get the bottles that are twice the size. Then the pads are pretty straightforward, one is for compound and one is for polish. I'm going to use the little engine lid side piece as my first test panel because it's pretty small. What you got to do is first sand it down with 1500 grit sandpaper. You're technically supposed to use this little rubber sanding block, but I don't have one. The main thing I hear is you need to be gentle and sand with very little pressure. If you apply too much pressure, then you'll leave deep scratches. Once the surface is smooth, then you move up to 2000 grit and do the same thing. I will admit it does feel kind of weird to be sanding my brand new paint and scratching it all up, but it should be worth it in the end. After sanding, then you clean the panel and then you compound. Compound is pretty much this abrasive chemical that is like a super fine sandpaper, and it'll remove scratches from the paint. The compound and polish are essentially the same exact thing, but compound is rougher in the first step. Then you do polish, which is finer and it gives you a better shine. So to compound, you just squirt some on the pad. Usually you do more than this, but it's a pretty small panel, so I'm doing less. Then you pat it all over the surface to spread it. Then you set the buffer to 1 and do a couple passes to spread it evenly. After that, you set the polisher to 4 or 5 and go at it. The main thing is to go somewhat slow, but you don't want to stop at all or you'll risk burning through the clear coat. Again, the whole thing is why I wanted to spray some extra layers of clear coat because I'm pretty much wearing it off now. You also want to move in a crosshatch pattern, so you go up and down all the way across, then side to side. I'm doing 5 passes. I just finished the compound and haven't started the polish yet, and you can already see just how much better it is. The left is the compounded one, and the right is the original. Obviously, there's still some orange peel, but hopefully more of that comes out with the polish. I don't think I'll remove it all since it was pretty bad to begin with, but this is just so much better that it's totally worth the extra work. Pretty much, I'm just going to do the exact same thing to every panel of the car now. I do want to sand and compound the entire car first, then move on to polish, and then wax after. But I have to admit, I am curious how the final product will look, so I've decided I'm going to compound, polish, and wax the C-pillar just as a test to see. Again, polishing is pretty much the same exact process as compounding, so straightforward enough. The wax I'm using is also Meguiars brand, and I actually used this stuff on my Fiat back in high school. I love it, it's easy, it looks great, though it is on the pricey side, but it's worth it because I remember even when I'd wax my Fiat once a month, this stuff would just last forever. Pretty much you just apply and rub it on. The instructions say to do a thin layer, probably so it's easier to wipe off in the end, but I tend to do a little more just because I'd rather do too much than not enough. After like 10 minutes, then you just wipe it off. Okay, there's obviously still some orange peel, but That is pretty remarkable. I was nervous at first because the orange peel was really bad, but this is acceptable now. I can live with this. I mean, when you compare it again to before, it's just night and day. So, time to get back to sanding and compounding the rest of the car for now. I'll admit, again, you are supposed to be light with the sanding, but honestly, the orange peel is just so bad. If I apply no pressure, this is simply going to take forever, so I have been getting a little more aggressive with my sanding in order to speed things up a bit. I know you really shouldn't because you could get deep scratches, but I just don't have time to spend hours on each panel at this point. Alright, another little mess up by me. I was buffing the spoiler and it's a very awkward shape. Obviously applying pressure to it is pretty hard since it just tips over, and I got a little scrape on it. Again, not a big deal, it's fine, it's whatever. I mean, I can get mad over this kind of stuff, but as a daily driver, the car is gonna eventually get scratched up anyways, and it's not like the paint job is perfect to begin with. But now I'm gonna reassemble the back of the car. The lights just go in with a couple nuts inside the trunk. Also, I know I said I was gonna compound the whole car first, then polish, then wax, but I've kind of just started going panel by panel and doing pretty much the whole process. So the bumper is ready to install. It's just held in with the 2 rear exhaust hanger bolts and then the 2 nuts in the trunk. Now I'm gonna polish and wax the trunk so I can put the spoiler on. Well, I'm gonna be replacing the old spoiler gaskets with some new stuff. I wish I was sitting here saying I'm doing it to refresh them, but honestly, I just could not find the other gasket. Luckily, I just went to the nearest Napa and they had some gasket rubber. It's a little thicker, but it should work fine. I just gotta trace it and cut. Luckily, I'd imagine the missing piece is just the exact same shape, but flipped. Now, installing the spoiler is definitely something I need to be careful with, because this is definitely one of those things you can really scratch up the paint with. Thankfully, I was able to do it with no issues, and bam, the back is done. Looks so great. The air vent is next. There's not really any way to buff this thing because of the way it's shaped, but thankfully it doesn't actually have too much orange peel anyways, so I just waxed it and call it good. It's worth noting there is supposed to be a gasket that surrounds the vent piece on the edges, but I can't really afford it right now, so I'm just gonna worry about that later. It's not like it's raining at all since it's summer anyways. Seriously, one of my favorite parts of the car. Just that alone is so cool to see as the car comes together. If you look really close, you can actually see the vent doesn't quite fit properly because of all the Bondo repair I had to do from the dent, but barely noticeable. Popping on these window trim pieces honestly took a while to figure out, but essentially you just go from above and press it in. I'm gonna work on the car a bit longer, but I'm definitely getting a bit tired from all this sanding and buffing in this heat. The car is gonna need another long day of work to be able to take it home, but oh man, when I check the weather, I almost want to just give up. Sanding, buffing, and assembling the rest of the car in 102-degree heat is gonna be insane. I really want to get this car back home though. It's been way too long, and to come this far just to have to wait another 4 days is just unacceptable. Another thing, the Celica doesn't have working AC, but the MR2 does, so I need it if I want to make the long drive home. I gotta get this car done tomorrow, even if I lose 10 pounds from sweat. This is it. It's the next day, and this is gonna be the last day this car is in this garage for this paint job. Unfortunately, I can already feel the heat coursing through the garage. If you notice me looking extremely damp and dripping, it's because my dad recommended I soak my shirt in cold water, then wear it to keep me cool, so any moisture you see on me is only half sweat. I gotta say, the idea definitely helps, but is pretty uncomfortable and awkward. I'm just finishing up the front end of the car, and man, it looks great. I've noticed the hood and trunk / engine lid have the most orange peel, while parts I sprayed off the car have the least orange peel. I mentioned that my theory was the smaller pieces are a lot easier to focus and spray evenly, plus I can get more angles on them, which helps. And I do think this is still true, but I've also realized that the hood and trunk probably have the most orange peel versus parts like the door, cause the spray gun I'm using is gravity fed, and I think since I have to reach over and aim the spray gun down on the hood and trunk area, the gun may not have been fed enough paint since it was angled downwards rather than upright. Thus, the paint came out rough and splattery. Again, I do think in the end the paint is acceptable for me, especially considering it's my first go around and the cheap tools I'm using, and it's fine because one day I do plan on taking the car to a shop to get a final professional repaint, but that'll be the very last thing I do since I realistically will ding the car up as I work on it more and swap the engine too. Really, my goal with the paint was just to get it to look decent compared to how it was. Anyways, I also need to swap the windshield wipers. We had some spare ones, so I repainted them with a rattle can, and you can see the difference. They go on easy, but you gotta make sure to align them correctly and test it. I also noticed I somehow got a tiny bit of overspray on the windshield. Not a big deal though, cause that just wipes off with thinner, which I'll do now. Well, I really done messed up with this one. I was installing the handle, which if you remember me getting these things off, they are a total pain in the butt. It's kind of complicated to explain exactly what happened here, but pretty much I dinged the door. Now, the other little scrapes I've caused already, I don't really care that much about since they're pretty easy to just ignore, but this one is definitely annoying since I'm gonna see it every time I open my door now. I'm almost tempted to buy an airbrush and spend a weekend just touching these up at some point, but for now, it's really not worth getting worked up over. I'm also installing the window trim, which is pretty straightforward, thankfully. Also, I'm going to do the mirror, which isn't too difficult. To pop the glass back on the mirror, you literally just press it into place until it snaps. Though I didn't actually notice this mirror was crooked this whole time until now. You can only barely tell, but it doesn't quite line up right. I don't know, it's not at all an issue, but at some point I'll probably look for a replacement and paint that, but not at all a priority. Now, what is annoying is I actually forgot the passenger door handle was still messed up. Again, this is the spare door I had, and when I removed the old handle, the nuts that held it in place snapped off the handle and are now just stuck on the bolt. There's no way to get a good grip on it since it's pretty much all round, so my best solution was to use a Dremel tool to cut a notch in it. Then with that, I was able to hold it with a screwdriver while I used a socket wrench on the bolt. Another thing I forgot was this power lock motor. I was prepared for this to be extremely annoying like the rest of the door stuff, but really it wasn't. The old one just unscrews, then the new one goes in its place and plugs in. The hardest part is probably just getting the rod cables snapped in place. Thankfully, it all works on the first try. This is the very last of the sanding and buffing left, and as I drip sweat from every part of my body, I can finally apply the last bit of wax. Oh boy, I'm reaching the end. Now, I'm installing the lip. Again, I'll go into more detail on how this works in the next video, but pretty much it should just bolt into place since I did my test fit, but in reality, it is a bit crooked since I messed with the valences when I repainted them. I can fix it by messing with them another time, but right now I really don't care and it is way too hot for me to be bothered. I also threw the side skirts on. It's worth noting, like the air vent, there's supposed to be a gasket you put on these, but I don't have it yet. I'll buy it when I can, but it really shouldn't be a big deal for now. Another small bit of evidence for my dent repair is the side skirt piece doesn't quite line up exactly how it should, but it's so minor, nobody would even notice if I didn't say anything. I also don't have my C-pillar trim on because I have the pieces at home since I still need to repair the tabs, so I'll get that done when I'm back. And the only piece of the car I didn't ever actually get to paint was the mud flaps. I skipped these because they're this rubber and you're supposed to mix a special compound in the paint to make it flexible. I couldn't get a hold of it in time, but I honestly may just use a rubber safe rattle can paint sometime and call it good, so I'll take care of them another time. But for now, there's nothing more I want to do than just leave this 100+ degree sauna and drive this car home. This MR2 has been sitting in this garage for nearly 3 months now and is finally going to see the road again. I am drenched in sweat, and I swear, even back when I played soccer for over 10 years of my life, I have never sweated this much or smelled this bad. I just want to blast my surprisingly good AC and go home. This car is still nowhere near done. I still got plenty of mechanical work to do, but with this paint, it's definitely entered a new era. I'm gonna wrap up the C-pillar stuff when I get home, but after that, I'm gonna take a break from working on the car and these videos just for a bit since I've been grinding out this paint for months now. It'll be nice to just drive it around for the summer and also get some different videos out. I'll still do a few small things before this, but the next big step is gonna be to start rebuilding the engine, which will probably happen early this fall. Anyways, thanks for watching and thanks to my patrons. Seriously, this car has come far and I'm glad everyone could experience it with me. Next episode, I hope to cut the vinyl decals and also put up the names of anyone who's ever helped out with the car on the underside of the hood. But until then, I'm gonna go enjoy this thing for a bit.